Okay, so welcome back. Το δεύτερο κομμάτι θα έλεγα είναι εξίσου σημαντικό όσο το πρώτο κομμάτι και θα μιλήσουμε για τα αθλητικά ποτά, ιδιαίτερα για next generation sports drinks. So the area of sports drinks has been an area of interest for sport and exercise science for many, many years. But I want you to remember that during the first Olympic Games in modern times, drinking water or drinking anything was considered a bad idea unless it was allegedly, as Spirits Louis did, maybe drank some wine. But in the 1970s, so before the 1970s, the idea was that drinking was a bad idea. Drinking was toxic. After the 1970s, things changed. It became drink as much as you can. So one extreme to another extreme. Toxic, drink as much as you can. The end result of drinking as much as you can, like in everything in life, too much of everything will kill you. Drinking too much ended up killing people. And I'm not being facetious, I mean killing people. People die, and you may have heard of this club in America which challenged the young people in the club to drink, who could drink the most amount of water, and the young lady died. She died from hyponatremia. The suggestion by Professor Tim Noakes from the University of Cape Town, and I should acknowledge University of Cape Town because both Mersha and Sean are PhD students at the University of Cape Town, so we thank them for their support of Sub2. So Professor Tim Noakes, who headed that lab for a very long time, wrote to explain what happened in the 1970s was the introduction of the industry, and in particular, we won't talk about the names of the companies, but the introduction of a big company that became one of the powerhouses of the sports drink market. And the idea was they wanted to sell, and therefore selling as much as possible of a product was a good idea. But keeping in mind, what was in the product? The product was sugar water. So when you buy these sports drinks, remember, you are buying water with some sugar in it. Okay? So when you pay your €3, this is what you are buying. We're not against sports drinks. Clearly, they've played an important role. Later on in the process, in the 1990s, early 2000, things changed again. And that's when I think a lot of the work we did in Ethiopia and Kenya really also played an important role to change the practice of drinking. It became better to drink to thirst, drink to how you feel, and importantly, as we said before, test what works for you. And my prediction is going to be in the near future, it's all going to be about the individual, not the average. We don't care about averages, we care about the individual. Anyway, so we and others came up, and the recommendations by the American College of Sports Medicine and other organizations was drink to thirst and prepare your drinks depending on the conditions you're going to face. If it's cold, if it's going to be hot, if it's an endurance event, if it's going to be a short event, how many times you're going to compete in a day or whatever. For today's presentation as a demonstration, maybe next year we can do something different, we're going to focus on the marathon. Why the marathon and why drink? Why sports drinks? Well, in the early part of my career, when I was a PhD student, my PhD was on how could we prevent the limited amount of fuel that we have in the muscle lasting for the duration of the marathon, for example, which is 42.2 kilometers, which is too far for the fuel tank to get us to the end. So what can we do? And the idea that we did for my PhD then was also based on some animal work in rats and mice, that if you feed a rat or a mouse fat, it uses the fat very well and makes the tank last longer. It was a nice idea, but humans are not rats. And there's been a lot of literature on trying to spare the carbohydrate tank. And the carbohydrate tank, the scientific term is glycogen or glycogono. So how can we delay so that tank can get us to the end of the race, whatever your race is? But when we start thinking more about the usage of fuels, carbohydrate and fat, we also realize that maybe we were making a big mistake. Maybe we don't want to spare carbohydrate. Maybe we want to use as much as we can, as quickly as we can. It sounds like a contradiction. Why? Well, the notion is that if you're burning carbohydrate versus fat, carbohydrate is a more efficient fuel. The oxygen cost of burning carbohydrate is less than the oxygen cost of burning fat. So if you want to become economical as a runner, you can go to altitude, you can improve through training, but can you become more economical simply by changing what you're eating and drinking? That was the idea. And we thought that's a simple way we could try and apply this to the marathon running, because if we can make our runners more efficient with fuel, wow, we've achieved a big goal. And I was married to a pharmacologist who was telling me that for many, many years, and it's been known by the pharmacological industry for a long time, that a lot of drugs are encapsulated for delivery depending on where you want to deliver the drug. And ourselves and a partner company that we worked with eventually had an idea to try and create a modern next generation sports drink that was really much more clever than sugar water. Because the problem we have, another problem we have, is that the stomach and the GI system does not want to have too much sugar in that environment. So you can't take a big amount of sugar or carbohydrate in the stomach and water at the same time and do sport or run a marathon, whatever, because the stomach doesn't like that. The sensors in the GI system determines there's a lot of sugar, carbohydrate, there's a lot of concentrated fluid, and it draws water into the stomach. And the end result, and some of you must have experienced this, or if you haven't, try the experiment at home. Drink 20% or 30% carbohydrate and go for a jog. You'll get diarrhea and you'll vomit. So don't do it. So how do you solve this problem? We thought, well, could we come up with a solution? And so what we're going to show you in this practical is the theory behind what we did. And then we have a real treat for you. We'll get you to try and actually see what happens to the drink when it hits your stomach, how it may work, and then you can even sample the drink. We are not trying to advertise the drink. Sub to myself, we don't get a penny from this. It's just to show you the power of innovation, trying to come up with solutions to problems by thinking out of the box. So let me get started. So we were interested in the marathon, and just let me indulge for a few moments with you on the Sub2 project. Its origins are really back in 2007, but we launched the project properly in 2014 because we wanted to try and do something that was considered humanly impossible to do. A human, we were told, cannot run a marathon under 2 hours. And at the time we launched the project, people thought this crazy professor and his students trying to break the 2-hour barrier. What ridiculous notion. But this was, and we'll talk a little bit about it tonight, was and is an anti-doping project. I wanted to convince with evidence the coaches and the athletes that were cheating that innovation, science, medicine can be a fantastic alternative to drugs, which is really the theme of what I'm doing. And so we wanted to do something that was considered crazy. Because then you can convince. That was the idea. So it became no longer when it could happen, but if it could happen, but when. And depending if you extrapolate these lines, the idea was it will happen in 2035 or happen in 2020. And as I said to you, when we launched the project, there was no belief beside our group, even our athletes, even when we launched the project with Haile Gebrselassie, I don't think he really believed it. And certainly with Kenenisa, when we were talking with Kenenisa, he didn't believe it's possible. I've put on here the recent world record, which in one sense is indicative of the fact that we've already, by launching this project in 2014, have influenced the field. Because the times have got faster and actually now approaching this line here. And when we launched the project, the idea was that the 2-hour barrier would be broken by 2020. And I still believe that is possible. So just for a few seconds, let's watch the last few meters of Eliud Kipchoge's recent world record. The drink that you will be tasting, the drink that you will hear about today, is what he's actually used during that race. But please don't get the wrong impression here. He didn't break the world record because of the drink. And secondly, this is not the gray area. This is not drugs. This is not anything like that. You'll see, we'll discuss that. It's innovation. And it's not a drug innovation. So let's just watch this.
But what a glorious sight this is for Eliud Kipchoge. He must have dreamed of these moments. He must have gone through these sights in his mind. That visualization, the glorious Brandenburg Gate. Into the shade for Eliud Kipchoge, into the sunshine now in more ways than one as the finish line lies ahead of him. He's going to break the 2 hours, 2-minute barrier, there's no doubt about this. The greatest performance in the history of marathon running on the male side. Paula Radcliffe's mark remains untouched by anybody so far. This is Radcliffe-esque. This is Eliud Kipchoge in supreme form, 150 metres to run. The crowds of the German capital roar him on. He smiles now, he knows the record is his. 2:02.57 by Dennis Kimetto, his compatriot, was a magical mark, the first sub-2:03 clocking. This will be the first sub-2:02 clocking, and by a monstrous margin he is going to break the world record. He comes towards the line, raises a sprint on those magical legs, and at last the world record is his. How fitting is this? The Olympic champion is the world record holder. 2:01.40, unofficially there for Eliud.
Okay. As I said as well with the double gold medals for Kenenisa and so on, we had a role to play. Innovation had a role to play here. But what really had a bigger role than even the innovation was something that I'm trying to achieve with you today. He started believing that a 2-hour is possible. And by the time he ran here, he knew someone can run 2 hours. And just the belief, and we'll talk about that tonight, belief can make you do amazing things. But in addition to belief, you need to have some innovations too, and the training and all the rest. So we launched the project in 2014 with Haile Gebrselassie. At the meeting were some great scientists in Ron Morn, who was also my PhD supervisor many years ago, who said, no doubts about a 2-hour marathon. Haile Gebrselassie, who attended, said, coaches have to be tough and open-minded. If there's one message for you today, especially the coaches, please be open-minded. Please don't be insecure when you have a team of 10 people around you, supporting you and you supporting them. That is the present and the future of coaching. If you're coaching by yourself, you're in the dark ages. You may say, okay, we don't have the resources to have teams, but let's work to find your teams. Being open-minded. We heard today, I think another key message today was experiment, collect data, individual, not averages. So what Haile is saying here, a very important message for you. I'll come shortly back to the notion of economy and the drink, because the important bit here was, as you can hear from Andy Jones, who was the physiologist to Paula Radcliffe when she broke her world record, And the person who's also invented the beetroot juice that some of you maybe have used or heard about, the idea of using beetroot as a means of making one more economical and also being used as a treatment potential for high blood pressure. So he said, excellent economy will be needed. And this is the team as well, together with ourselves, that launched the project in 2014. Remember, this is an anti-doping project. The way we put this together and the way I hope we can influence you, your projects, and if I can influence sports excellence, this is the way to design your innovations, your projects, using a collective multidisciplinary approach. Engineers, physiologists, physicians, physiotherapists, all the different types of people working together, people who sometimes have known nothing about sport, you can often get some really exciting, interesting things. Put this all together and come up with what is called deliverables, which is outcomes that on their own may not make a big difference, but when you combine 10 of these innovations, you produce a great difference. That the combination of these are far more powerful as a weapon than the most powerful of the drug methods that we know so well. That's the philosophy. And just showing you the kind of outcomes, the kind of disciplines that are important. And remember what I said early on. These innovations can improve the quality of life of the public who are not interested in sport. This is not only about sport. When we criticize the idea of sending man to the moon, one is very short-sighted. The fact that we accept the telephone, the screens we use, the pill that you saw, Sean, that I have now in my stomach. Why do you think someone invested money to make that pill? It was for astronauts. It wasn't for sport or for the firefighters. It was for astronauts. So we should not only be doing science, and this is a message for the Ίδρυμα Stavros Niarchos. We should not do science only because it solves problems of today. It should solve problems for the future, and that's a message for the foundation. Think out of the box. So here you see some of the scientists that were part of the project when we launched it, and for this particular part of the workshop, we're going to talk about nutrition, and then in the last part of the workshop, we're going to talk more about the bioenergetics and modeling and biomechanics. But we're going to focus very much now on nutrition. But I just want to remind you of this guy here, who was poached by Nike, who then liked the idea and stole Andy from us and also stole some of our athletes. But that's not me being bitter, just angry. But anyway, that's a different story. We'll come back to the Nike project later on. Our budget was a few dollars. The Nike budget was 30 million. You can assess how much progress the different teams have made. But for me, it's really exciting that there's 2 teams. I hope there's going to be 20 teams in the near future. And the good thing now is that it's not a crazy idea anymore. Now it's even become the billion-dollar race. Unfortunately, I'm not making any billions to try and put back into the project yet, but hopefully we'll make some money to reinvest it into the project soon. So just briefly, before we get into the drink and how the drink was formulated, to try and get investment in this kind of innovation, don't expect people are going to come and throw money at you because you have an interesting idea. The world is much more difficult than that. You have to go out and find them. So this is my flight schedule for 2015. It's almost as bad as it is today. I'm saying it's almost true because I really didn't go all over there, but I almost did. And here, together with Jos Hermans, the manager of Kenisa Bekele and Haile Gebrselassie, was part of the launch team. We even visited a very famous sports drink company that if you look very carefully, you'll see who it is. And we were very, very close to securing $30 million that would really have financed the whole project. And it's given away where it was, Salzburg, so you probably figured out where we are. Okay? But eventually we didn't get we weren't successful. But then the most unlikely avenue produced the money. The money came, and that's why let's interact with the media. And I think there was a message that was said yesterday. Let's interact with the media, the good media. New York Times, they also thought this was a crazy idea. So let's make a story in the New York Times about this crazy idea. Man versus the marathon. Okay? And that's me running on the Dead Sea. Because and I'm going to Tel Aviv in March, because I'm still going to do this. I'm going to race a human on the water. And I will do that before I die for sure. Okay? So that's not off the target yet. We're on target to do this. But on a more serious note, that publicity and other publicity led us to come up with partners. Partners from around the world, as you can see here. And I'm going to focus on one particular partner for today, which is important, at least for this workshop, which is a company called Morton. When we launched the project, this company was a startup that had just started with an innovation developed by a triathlete. The triathlete had always noted that when he was eating his gels, or ingesting his gels when he was training and competing, his hands would get sticky. And therefore it became uncomfortable for his bike and whatever. So he purely wanted a solution for the stickiness. That's all he wanted. And like the example that you heard before, he was also aware of the encapsulation aspect, where you encapsulate either a drug or you can encapsulate food. Any of you like myself who love food and love Michelin-star restaurants, which I do when I can afford it, a lot of the food now is encapsulated. You make incredibly interesting foods by encapsulating food. He had the idea, so it wasn't a sub-2 project idea, it was his idea, to encapsulate fructose and glucose so that his hands wouldn't get sticky. That was the idea. And to be able to provide this carbohydrate. And that was his invention. And this is the real story, and those of you here last year would have heard the story, so I apologize for saying it again. After the publicity of all of this, I was getting thousands of emails, and I wasn't responding to them because there's too many to respond. But this company kept persevering, and don't ask me why I had my phone in my bath, but I was in my bathtub, and I picked up the phone, and this guy says, "Please, Professor Pitsalas, can we talk?" And I said, okay, you found me in an uncomfortable position now, but anyway, tell me what you want. Thinking about the eureka moment as well from the famous experiment of Archimedes and the Archimedes principle that you all should know. The crown, the gold, you all know that, remember that. Anyway, so I said, okay, just tell me, what do you want? He told me about this encapsulation, and I didn't run through the streets of Eastbourne where I live like Archimedes did, but I did jump up saying, wow, this is amazing. Do you know what you have? He says, yes, we have a non-sticky gel that we can do some amazing things with. I said, yes, but do you really know you can have a fantastic next generation sports drink? And that's where the whole thing started. So out of crazy ideas, you get up with something that is hopefully quite interesting, and I'll share that with you today. So that work package is read very much by Andrew Bosch, who's also the supervisor of Sean and also the supervisor of Coach Mersha. So if you go onto the website of the company, and I'm not selling company here, I get no financial benefit. They do pay they've given a scholarship to Sean Suttal for his PhD. So he has a PhD scholarship, my disclaimer here. So I'm not representing the company or anything like that. But let's see what the company, the way they advertised what we've developed.
The harder we push ourselves, the more energy we need. Unfortunately, our body's ability to take up carbohydrates during hard physical activity is limited, which often causes stomach problems. But that's about to change. Through an innovative use of hydrogel technology, Morton has discovered a way to avoid the problems by encapsulating the carbohydrates. A key component is natural alginate, extracted from seaweed. This dietary fiber is used to create a unique structure with the ability to carry salt and carbohydrates, such as glucose and fructose. Because the high levels of carbohydrates are encapsulated, they're easier for the stomach to tolerate and can be transported towards the intestine, where they are absorbed. The first product to be launched is Morton Drink Mix, a pH-sensitive liquid that after intake converts into a hydrogel in contact with the acidity of the stomach. And it contains no added flavor, preservatives, color, or acids. The next generation of sport fuels has been developed together with elite athletes, and Morton is now working closely with several international research initiatives to further explore the future of sport nutrition.
Okay, so I'll pass over to Sean, who will just tell you a little bit about what he's doing, and we'll do a short little demo for you. Sean.
Thank you. And so can we pass
Speak slower.
can we pass the drinks around, please?
So you're all going to get a sample. When you receive the small little shot glass, if you want to use a better term, please don't do anything to it yet. Just hold it and don't drink it or anything like that. Just have a look at it.
Exactly. So while that's happening on, I'll talk a little bit about how the product works. And yes, two.
Huh.
Yeah. Yeah.
Take 2 shot glasses. You need the 2 glasses. Don't do anything yet.
And so this product is interesting and useful for us, as we described.
Don't do anything yet. Sorry. Don't mix them or anything yet. We want to do it. It's okay if you have, but try not to mix them yet. Just wait. Xenia is just too fast. Being an athlete or an ex-athlete, she's a little bit too fast for us. So don't mix them yet.
So while that's going on, I'll describe a bit about what this product is and why it's interesting for athletes. So as we say, the hydrogel is made of sodium alginate, and this reacts to pH. So if we mix this with a carbohydrate drink and it enters the stomach, which has a low pH, this then forms a sodium alginate pectin hydrogel. So this sugar is now encapsulated in a gel. So then when it goes into the intestine, which is where receptors are to detect the sugar present, they do not detect the sugar as it is encapsulated. Then a unique thing about the hydrogel is then in a higher pH, further up in the intestine, the hydrogel will then dissipate, and then the sugars are available for uptake. So then this means that the typically associated stomach upset you get when running, and I'm sure a lot of the runners here would have had this before when you're running while having gels, and then you have to stop and give up the session. That's due to these receptors firing due to the sugar present in the intestine, which then stops the emptying of the stomach. So then by avoiding these receptors, the emptying continues, and the sugar is then available for absorption. So I can't tell you much more about the effects of this, as we're kind of researching this. And this is brand new, so it's only 1 year since it's been launched. The information we're getting and the current studies we're completing suggests that this emptying and the theory behind enhanced emptying rates is true.
We'll show you the data just later on.
And further work is needed to see actually the effect on performance of this. But for sure, it definitely helps with stomach problems and preventing athletes who have stomach problems from experiencing these. So with your 2 glasses, you should have one which is lemon juice, and we have one clear liquid, which is the sports drink. So with the spoon, you can see the drink is just any drink, is essentially just sugar water, and this contains a sodium alginate within it.
Tell them what percentage it is.
So this is 50%. So if you were to consume this in larger volumes while running, you'd throw up straight away. Don't worry, it won't make you throw up.
Remember, 15%, okay, compared to a typical sports drink, which is normally about 7%. So a 15% here, you got double the amount of a typical sports drink that, as you heard from Sean, if you drank it and ran, you'd get sick. Okay? But that's what we want if you want to burn carbohydrate solely. Okay? So carry on.
And so what I'd like you to do, can we switch? Yep. Is take this lime juice or lemon juice, which is acid, so it's in your stomach acid, and then pour it slowly into the drink. So this is simulating what would happen within your stomach.
It's purely acting as the gastric juices in your stomach, okay? That's what we do. Just pretending now this is happening inside your stomach, all right?
and you'll see quickly some kind of a gel forms, and is much more viscous within the solution, like a jelly.
It looks like a jelly or honey.
Yeah.
Can you see? It just drops.
So this is what happens inside of your stomach when you drink this. Obviously, you don't have lemon juice in your stomach, but it's fairly similar.
And remember now the glucose molecules, the fructose molecules, are being encapsulated by the gel, and therefore the sensors can't see them. And we call it the stealth drink. You know the stealth bombers that can't be detected by radar? It's the stealth drink. It cannot be seen. And it can then release your package that you want. And at the moment, we talk about glucose, fructose. Theoretically, we could add any nutrient we want. We'll talk a little bit maybe about supplements. Which supplements work? Maybe caffeine works. It does. We can add that, for example, or whatever we want. We don't want to give all our secrets away today. We want to keep you something to come and see next year.
And so the good thing about this demonstration as well is lemon juice, sodium alginate, pectin, maltodextrin, fructose, and sodium. So it tastes pretty good as well. So you can all try. This is what our elite athletes are drinking on a daily basis.
Συνεχιάσας. Yamas. Okay, thank you, Sean. Thanks for that. Now, you would have tasted the lemon there, okay? Normally, it wouldn't taste of lemon, because we're pretending now the lemon is your stomach juices, okay? The beauty of this drink as well is it has no taste. It tastes nothing, okay? Because it doesn't have any flavoring, and we don't want to put flavoring in. Because if you're drinking a lot of the stuff, you don't really want the sweet taste in your mouth, although keep in mind of the literature that says that there may be some central effects at the brain level by having the sensors in our mouth actually detect the sugar in the compound that you may be drinking. So there may be some sense as well that from our mouth we also get some benefit from a drink, and it may be even bigger in this particular case because it's not encapsulated in your mouth. So here we're getting the benefit of the central effect on the brain, because you may be aware of the studies that show that just by putting the drink in your mouth, moving around and spitting it out, there was performance benefit. So maybe by having 30%, because that was actually 15%, but I'll show you just now what we did with much higher amount. Maybe we can have a great central effect by using this drink as well. But that's the kind of the studies that we are doing at the moment. All right. But come on, let's be scientists. Let's all be scientists for the next hour. This sounds crazy, like the sub-2 idea. Does it really work? Sean suggested there, gave some reasons as to why he thinks it works. But he was also being a good scientist there because he said the only thing that is 100% sure, and the only thing we are 100% sure, is that if you're a person who has a sensitive stomach, and when you drink, you don't feel well, you get GI problems. And I'm not going to mention the name of the athlete, but there's a winner. He's a gold medalist, no, sorry, he's a medalist as well in the Olympics, in the marathon, who doesn't have breakfast before the major marathons, including the ones that he's won. So he's won major marathons by missing food from the night before. Imagine if he knew about this drink at the time, or even now, what he could do if he had breakfast. Because we know after a night's sleep, your tank is partly empty. You need that breakfast. So the only thing we are 100% sure is that you get the carbohydrate, and if you have GI problems, you will not have GI problems here. Because, as I said, the stomach doesn't know it's there. But we wanted to also have a look what happens if we gave it to athletes during competition or during training. And together with a very famous producer called Alex Gibney, some of you may have heard of his work. He's an Academy Award director. He was fascinated by the warfare between myself and the most famous shoe company in the world, which name will remain unnamed, and he wanted to document this war between us. And he came out to Kenya to see what we were doing. And at that time, we were doing the first experiment to test, and you're not going to hear wrong here, this is the number, to test a 30% carbohydrate drink, 30%, which is many-fold greater than anything else that had ever been used. But remember, more isn't always better. But what happens if we gave 30% during a training session? As it happened, and by the way, think of the previous session, we talked about altitude training, and also my comment about coffee, that most likely the coffee we're drinking is from here, and most likely this could be this is actually the tea plantations here, okay, in the Nandi Hills of Kenya, where we do a lot of our training. And for the athletes in the audience, or those who want to send athletes, I can't imagine a better place to train than this. Not too high, at least for a first visit, about 2,200, 2,300, but less than that, but a beautiful place to train. And this is where we wanted to test the drink. So 30% altitude, and also by coincidence, and also because the journalists wanted, and the crew wanted to film, and there was so much work to do to set up the filming, it happened to be in the middle of the day, the hottest time of the day, which made me feel very nervous, because now we're giving a 30% carbohydrate during the hottest time of the day, and we're being filmed. I mean, you can't think of a worse scenario than having those three combinations. So if you hear my voice being strange, it's because I was very, very concerned. Watch what happened. So we just passed the 8-kilometer mark, so we're not halfway yet. We started off with about 20 runners. Now in the pack we have about 15 of them, so we've lost about 5.
With any long-distance run, there's a race within a race. How do you deliver enough carbohydrates, which the body converts to energy, to keep a runner performing at top speed for as long as possible?
We're witnessing an experiment that's never been done before. Instead of having the typical Gatorade sports drink, which is one of the top drinks up until now, today we're providing for the first time a 30% carbohydrate drink. There'll be disbelief that we gave a 30% carbohydrate solution, because if you have anything more than 7 or 8% carbohydrate, typically what that does, it draws water into the gut and causes diarrhea and vomiting.
Yannis wants to distill the feeding of marathon runners into a scientific equation. He has begun working with a Swedish drink company to find a way to fool the digestive system into ingesting more energy than the body can expend.
A typical sports drink today would be 6% carbohydrate. The drink that we are preparing here today is 30%.
The idea being that more carbohydrate that you have available for the muscles, the better people will perform.
So you saw the experiment in terms of in the field. We gave 30%. You can go online and you can hopefully see the whole movie as to exactly what happened and all the rest. I don't want to waste too much time. But the athletes performed incredibly well. There were no issues, no GI problems, and all the athletes, every single one of them, commented that they were able to perform at a very high level on the day, also because of the drink. It certainly helped them. But for me, that's not enough evidence. We want more evidence. Also, these athletes were running in a training session that mattered, but it wasn't a race. What you want to know is what happens during a race situation. And actually, there's a message for you today, and also a message for the organizers here, is we have to get the laboratory out into the field, into competition. And that's what we did next. Here we see Kenenisa Bekele in the Berlin Marathon, trying an earlier version of the innovation. which was in this case here around about a 14% carbohydrate drink. We had done a lot of experimentation together with the team, with Mersha, with Sean out in Ethiopia. We had tested this a lot, and we were confident that for our athlete, it worked very well during training. But training is training, competition is competition. What would happen during competition? And I will show you in the next short video clip what happened, and it was one of the most terrifying days of my life, but also one of the most rewarding for myself and the team. Watch what happened.
Welcome to Berlin, Germany's capital city, the route of the marathon once again. Very, very competitive men's race. Wilson Kipsang, the former world record holder, determined to get it back. And Kenenisa Bekele, the greatest distance runner in history, perhaps, running here in the marathon today. I've loved the way that Bekele has gradually stalked Kipsang over this last 3 or 4 minutes, closed him down.
Berlin in 2016, we tried a 14% sports drink. Into the race, he was dropped by Wilson Kipsang at about 30 kilometers or so.
I focused on my pace, and when he went away, I knew that I can catch him,
They are side by side now, battling it out.
Who is going to prevail at the end of this?
Watching the faces of the managers and others, the face changed when they actually saw what Kenenisa was doing. And all of a sudden, the penny dropped.
And there's Jos Hermans on the side giving a drink to his athlete.
After 35, when he actually took on the 14% carbohydrate drink, he felt this incredible amount of energy.
This Bekele is getting away. This is an astonishing piece of...
I'm sitting in this car here. My face is against the window. I'm terrified.
Sustain this.
that stage when I passed him before 2-3 kilometers, no chance for him.
Isn't this remarkable, the unleashing of the full power?
He's powering away down this long straight, 55, 56, 57. He's inside 2:3, 2:59. Wow! What a performance by Kenenisa Bekele, the fastest time in the world this year.
What you may not know is that that clock was wrong, and amongst other things as well, there was a possibility, Mersha, that we could have broken the world record on that day. We missed it by a number of different reasons, okay? But anyway, also what's quite interesting about that, when the athlete was being dropped, the manager, who was also following on the motorbike, came to the vehicle, the white vehicle you saw, and knocked on my window. And he starts shouting at me, saying, "Yannis, your stupid experiment, your stupid sugar drink, too much sugar is destroying the athlete, he's cramping, blah, blah, blah." What do? Athletes have only a few marathons in their lives. He was well prepared. Mersha prepared him well. This experiment was going wrong. I called Sean, who was in the tent with the team. "Sean, what's going on?" His response, "Yannis, no problem. He's looking worried, he's a bit worried, only because he couldn't get to the drink. There's no problem." And the fact that he was being dropped at that point was because, I don't know if you noticed, he was wearing the new, at that point, Mayfly Nike shoe, which he had received only a few days before the competition, with the carbon fiber plate, which will be part of the next session. And it changed the way he was running. So it was actually causing him hamstring problems, because you shouldn't wear a new shoe with a carbon fiber plate in it that acts as a spring, first time almost in a race, although he had experimented a little bit before, but not enough. And because he's the most intelligent marathon runner I've ever met, he solved his hamstring problem. How? If you watch the race, by stretching. He's running and he's stretching. And people saying, "What is he doing? Why is he doing like that with his arms?" He was trying to stretch because he spent a lot of time with our sub-2 physiotherapist, knows how to control his body very well, and managed to overcome the hamstring problem. And then he just took off, and the rest was history. The other interesting thing from the story is little bit of knowledge is dangerous knowledge. Because after this race and in the months that came after, we were hoping that a lot of the athletes, a lot of the athlete managers, a lot of the different race managers would want to interact with Sub2 and support the project because all these innovations require investment. But no, they thought, we don't need the scientists, we don't need the team, we will do it ourselves. So one of the top athletes, I won't mention the name, took the innovation, went to competition, didn't make up the drink like you just done perfectly, and what happened? Halfway through the race, bends over and vomits it all out because they didn't do it properly. Again, a little bit of knowledge can be dangerous knowledge. So, if you are going to use any of these things, please do it in a way that is informed. So this is the team at the end of that race. One of the proudest moments of our team, and you can see how the smiles are really huge on everyone's face. And what's interesting about this company, some of the company members are here, is that their company, the startup, is being used as an example for a prominent business school in the US of how to go from an idea to a company that's selling a product in under a year. The power of sport, the power to change. So let's don't ridicule the sport industry. It's a billion, if not $1 trillion industry. Let's work together. Unfortunately, money makes the world go round. For us, the philosophy of Sub2 is not only about anti-doping, although anti-doping is the prime reason we exist. It's for sharing the knowledge with everybody. So the philosophy is we innovate, and we, in the spirit of the universality of sport, to provide our innovations for everybody. Because if we don't provide our innovations for everybody, one could argue it is a form of institutionalized or whatever doping in one sense. We have to provide this for everyone. And that's also why, if we look carefully at the IAAF rules in terms of shoes, and we'll talk about that in the next practical, it's important that shoes or any innovation is available for everybody equally. So everything we're doing, we try and publish. Here's a paper written by Sean and the team on sports rinks on the edge of the new era. If you can't find it, let me know. I'm happy to send it to you. And we're under a lot of, we're working very, very hard. Sean is working very hard together with my other students in the laboratory. And by the end of the year, we'll finish 2 big experiments that Sean will briefly, in the next few minutes, talk about when I put up the slides shortly. So, as I said to you, in the universality of sport, and this is not an advertising, the first mix came out, the second mix came out, and a third one was to be announced in 2017. The third one was going to be the Sub2 version. Note that we passed 2017, we're ending 2018, and we're still not launching this drink. Why? Because we still don't have evidence that it works. Despite all of this, it could be that Kenenisa won the race despite a drink. So we need to be sure before we put our name to anything that it actually does work. But the point of this presentation was to show how to innovate and innovate and innovate. Just for an interesting note, Mo Farah has bought shares into this company, so even athletes want to invest in good ideas. So I'll call up Sean just for 5 minutes, just to end off, who will tell you what he's doing in the next few weeks to complete that aspect. Microphone.
Yeah. It's only the slides.
Yeah, yes, sir.
Okay. Yes, so as the introduced, and as you saw in the filming, there was a lady with a tube down her throat, and this is what's commonly known as a gastric emptying study. And looking at gastric emptying, which is the rate that a fluid or food will empty the stomach into the intestine, is very important, as this will also help determine the rate at which carbohydrate may then be available into the blood, into the muscles. So what we're doing to assess this, this new drink, and if this encapsulation does enhance the emptying, is a gastric emptying study using a double aspiration or double sampling method. So you see here, this is our subject, and in this drink here is the drink of choice. At this time was just water. It was a familiarization. And 500 milliliters of a drink is instilled into the subject's stomach with a known quantity of a dye. And then by sampling the contents of the stomach at regular intervals and assessing the amount of dye that's in that, the volume, we can then determine the volume. So to look at this study, we all used 18% solutions. So as I say, with modern day solutions, while running is not possible. And we had 3 drinks. We had a glucose fructose, a maltodextrin fructose, and a maltodextrin fructose with this hydrogel, with this encapsulation. And what we found is that drink A, which is the glucose and fructose, emptied the slowest out of all of the 3 drinks. The B, so the maltodextrin fructose, that's a typical sugar which you would have in a normal sports drink, emptied the same rate initially, but then sped up at the latter part of the 90 minutes. And then the important one is the hydrogel, so the encapsulated version, empties significantly quicker, this line here, significantly quicker over this first hour, suggesting that there is not the inhibition of the gastric emptying from the receptors. And similarly, we had another drink, which is a 14%, so less sugar in the hydrogel. And we see this initial part here is very similar between the 2 drinks, so it seems that the sugar differences made very little difference when it's all encapsulated. There are some differences here, however, looking at the size of the error bars, it's unlikely that's actually any major effect. So, in conclusion of this data, suggests that this encapsulation significantly enhances the initial emptying rate, possibly suggesting that this avoiding the receptors in the intestine is working. And so now we've finished the study. This data, so I should say, this data is based on an N of 4, sorry. We have finished an N of 8, and the graphs look very similar. There's slight differences, but the theme between N of 4 and N of 8 is the same. So now we're moving on to another running study. And during this study is what's called a tracer study. So in this, we're providing drinks at regular intervals every 15 minutes. And within these drinks, we add what's known as a tracer. So that's a labeled carbon, which is different to normal carbon that you'd normally get in a drink. And by ingesting this drink over time while exercising at a fixed rate, we can then determine from breath samples how much of that drink is actually being used in the muscle, with the idea the more of the drink you can use in the muscle, the better. So in this study, as you can see, we're taking breath samples throughout, taking blood samples throughout, drinks throughout, and questionnaires regarding gut comfort and how comfortable they are. The drinks we're using is a water, so just a standard baseline, 70 grams an hour of a normal drink, so it's a drink as you could buy, a 70 gram an hour including a hydrogel, and then a very high amount of sugar, which is 180 grams with a hydrogel. And put it in context, this 180 grams is about 26%, so it's much, much higher than you could possibly tolerate during a running. So if this was not with a hydrogel, the athlete would 100% throw up on the treadmill. So the data on this is not available yet. We're still running through the study, and we hope to finish a significant portion by Christmas, and then by January, February should be the final subjects. So keep your eyes out and peeled on the publications. This should hopefully come out soon next year.
Thank you, Sean. Thank you very much. And just to say that we've been invited to this very important event that happens every year, the International Sport and Exercise Nutrition Conference 2008 in Newcastle in December, where we'll be presenting the data from all the studies that you just heard. So we try and make everything we do evidence-based and available in the scientific literature as soon as possible. And that's more for the academics in the room. And at that point, I'll stop this part of the practical or the lecture on this and open to questions. And I'm told by the organizer we have at least 5 minutes of questions, should there be any questions. Yes, if you basically put your hand up, when you get the microphone, just please introduce yourselves so we know who you are, or at least I know who you are. So there's a question here. Okay. Καλησπέρα.
Λοιπόν, ονομάζομαι Άλκης, είμαι φοιτητής ψυχοθεραπείας.
Ωραία.
Πρώην αθλητής σε ένα extreme sport, τέλος πάντων, πολύ ακραίο. Είχα πολλούς συναθλητές οι οποίοι χρησιμοποιούσαν τα energy drink για μία αλφα βοήθεια σε επιδόσεις τους, διάφορων ειδών, όχι μόνο μια συγκεκριμένη μάρκα, αλλά μετά γινόταν εθισμός, δηλαδή ήταν overdose.
Ναι.
Ασχολήθηκα με το paintball, επαγγελματικά για 9 χρόνια. Η ερώτησή μου είναι η εξής. Επειδή ήταν εθισμένοι εκείνοι με αυτό το προϊόν που έχει μια τεχνολογία, ας πούμε, stealth, θα μπορούσε να ξεγελάσει έναν αθλητή ο οποίος είναι εθισμένος στο energy drink και να μην χρειαστεί να κάνει αυτό το overdose?
Okay, that's an interesting question. I'll say it in English. The question is that he was an athlete in extreme sport, and they would have energy drinks in preparation. And if I've not misunderstood you, they get addicted to it. Okay, and could there be anything in the encapsulation process, in the provision of carbohydrate or whatever we're providing, that can produce the same kind of addiction? Sorry. What does it mean addiction? Okay, but before we talk what it means addiction, but the issue here is that it's not the sugar that I'm worried about from the addiction point of view, although sugar has other problems in terms of obesity and when I know from living in Greece and visiting my parents in hospital when they were unwell, people visit them and bring them Lucozade. It's like the normal Greek thing to do, which makes no sense to me whatsoever, and the problems of sugar drinks. But the sugar worries me less in terms of maybe your question. It's more the other substances that are offered in some of the energy drinks which can cause addiction, you know. So it's more the kind of other, let's call them stimulant, that could actually create a form of addiction of some sort. But it depends how you define addiction. So in terms of our drink, though, given the fact it's glucose and fructose, it's not really an issue. And I'd say this is not something that you would sip or drink every day all the time. It's only specifically when you're wanting to provide a lot, in this case, carbohydrate for a specific purpose, and it's not something that you'll actually be doing all the time because you don't necessarily want to be giving glucose all the time. For example, there's I won't go off topic too much, but there's talking about periodization in terms of training. There's also very much interest in periodization in terms of sports nutrition. It could be there's at least some groups, and I think maybe even here in Greece, they're working here on this, on trying to go from high carbohydrate to actually low carbohydrate diets to try and influence fat utilization in terms of producing kind of mitochondrial benefits within the energy system of the muscle. So it's not really an issue in this case, although I fully agree with you. And as a member of the International Olympic Committee Medical and Scientific Commission, we are very concerned of the damage that the energy drink industry is doing in general. So we have to be very, very careful and make sure that we are very clear on the statements of what a product does or what an innovation does, so it's not actually abused.
Okay. Και μία ακόμα ερώτηση.
Ναι.
Είδαμε ότι το gel δίνεται και σε αθλητές κατόπιν αγώνα, ας πούμε. Δηλαδή θα μπορούσε να δοθεί. Κάποιο άλλο energy drink δεν θα μπορούσε γιατί θα έχει παρενέργειες.
Όχι, δεν είναι ιδιαίτερο ότι θα έχει. Δηλαδή, τα energy drinks, άμα είναι 5, 6, 7% δεν θα έχει στον αγώνα, άμα το δώσεις, δεν θα έχει παρενέργεια. Απλώς δεν θα μπορείς να δώσεις την ποσότητα υδατάνθρακα που μπορείς να θέσεις να δώσεις. Αυτό είναι το delivery. Αυτό σκέψου σαν ένα delivery mechanism. Όχι, και είναι κάτι που είναι κάτι natural που φτιάχνεται στο φαγητό που φτιάχνουμε anyway. Δεν είναι κάτι φαρμακευτικό, συσκευασμένο, anything like that. Έτσι είναι το this. Okay. Άλλες ερωτήσεις? Ναι.
No. Okay, yes. So we've heard a lot. My name is Lazarus. I'm an athlete. I'm not a coach. My field is in fire safety. but that's
yes, fantastic.
That's a different thing now.
Yes.
Okay.
You'll be interested in the next demonstration in particular.
I'm interested in the pill you have in your stomach as well,
Yes.
actually, to be honest.
Yes. What's my temperature? Carry on.
Yes. So my question is, we heard a lot about carbohydrate being used as a fuel. My guess is that for these elite athletes, fat utilization is not that high and is not an important factor. For mere mortals, like a lot of people, probably fat utilization is very important, but for these elite people, it's not, I guess.
If you asked me that question 15 years ago, I would have given you probably a different answer to the answer I'm going to give you now. And it also relates a little bit with the previous question in terms of sugar. And let me start by answering with a nice anecdote. And those of you who've gone to Kenya will have experienced that. If you visit a Kenyan, especially in these regions where the athletes train, they will, to greet you, they will serve you tea from the tea plantations. But as soon as you put it in your mouth, you'll get a shock. The shock is the amount of sugar contained in it. And we've analyzed it in a paper by a Greek PhD student, Lukas Beis, who's now based here in Athens. For his PhD, we tested this and looked at the diet. And 20% of the diet of the Kenyan athlete diet, or even the general population in that region, was refined sugar. And then they eat all the Kenyan foods that are high in carbohydrate. And their diet was basically, and the sports nutritionist people in the room here will know that you want to give between 8 and 12 grams of carbohydrate per kilogram body mass. These Kenyans were all having more than 8 or 10 or 12 sometimes. So they're eating solely carbohydrate, a lot of sugar. Do they have type 2 diabetes? 0. What happens though, a lot of the athletes become politicians. What happens to politicians around the world? Yeah, okay. And then they have type 2 diabetes. So it's not the sugar that's dangerous. It's like, but coming back to the fat bit, because they're having so much carbohydrate, and from what I showed you today, and we can sit and discuss the bioenergetics of this, it seems advantageous to burn carbohydrate. But the rest of the time when they're doing the easy runs and whatever, and tonight we'll talk with Moshe about the kind of training they do. They do the hard training we spoke about before, maybe bone breaking or whatever, the interval training. But in the morning in Kenya, 5 in the morning, they go for an easy run that even I can do for the first kilometers. For the first kilometer, actually for maybe 800 meters. But my point of mentioning that is I never knew why they did that. Why, after hard training the night before, do you wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning and go for a run that is easy? What was the point of that? It's not easy. It can be easy, though. It's at least easier. Okay, but my point is, why do they do that? Then 2 hours later, they'll go into interval training session. And what could be happening is what you're saying here, is that at a lower intensity, I'm going to speed up, they utilize a lot of fat, and therefore they could be enhancing the mitochondrial content. While the interval training, they're maximizing mitochondrial function. The idea of periodization of nutrition, periodization of training, but we need to have the markers, and I'm sorry, my answer is too long. So I hope I've answered your question.
So I just want to say that when I was in Kenya in 1999, and I asked the coach of the Kenyan team, what are you training for? He said, we are trying to break the 2 hours barrier. And it was 1999. I said, it's not impossible. You can not do that. But he said, no, we will run under 2 hours. So they have it in mind, but it was not so well organized as your effort, and I am sure that you will achieve it. A lot of people are looking from the live streaming, and I have an answer from my friend. And there is an opinion that during training we shouldn't use energy drinks, and use it only, not for the main volume of our training, and use it mainly during races. What is your opinion?
Please thank your friend who asked that question. It's such a brilliant question. And I don't know the answer, but I'll tell you what I think the answer is. And it depends what part of your training, where you're at. And it's also got to do a little bit with the previous session on altitude training. If you want to do, and we discussed it, and we'll talk about it later on when we talk about the training. My philosophy of training in terms of a sub-2 marathon runner, which is what the session is tonight, is that we need to run further in training. We need to do more 44 kilometers and 45 kilometers, which marathon runners don't want to do in training. And my idea, my philosophy, and we're discussing with Mersha, and we don't know what the full agreement is, and I'm interested to hear what he says tonight, is how many times during a 12-week cycle do you do 45 miles 45 kilometers or 44 or even 40? Currently, some marathon runners will never run 42 before a marathon, before they race, okay? I think that's wrong. I think we need to do more of those, and even maybe reaching a situation of even, and I don't want to preempt what Mersha is going to say tonight, but if I was the coach, I probably would work towards eventually being able to do 42 or 43 kilometers per month leading up to a race. Don't go and do that tomorrow because you'll have disaster.
I've already done it.
Oh, okay, brilliant. Wonderful. That is what I think you need to do, but I'm coming back to answer the question. And I'm sorry I'm being so long, but I had to explain that to make my answer correctly. But when you run 42 or 44 kilometers twice a month for 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 months, you're actually doing a marathon, 2 marathons in a month. That has a huge toll on the body. So what you want to do is try and get that distance in, get that work, but in the easiest way. So I think when you want to do your long sessions that are important that you do it well, as easy as possible, so you get the benefit but not the damage, I would do everything I do for the race. I would use the drink, I would use the super shoe with the carbon fiber plate, because I want to have a quality run, but not kill myself. So I think it's the equivalent of, I don't know if...
Perfect conditions always.
Perfect conditions, not necessarily always, but for those specific runs, I would say perfect conditions. Even, I don't know if you tried it, and we're going to discuss with Mersha, we're thinking completely out of the box. Let's do some long runs downhill. You think, Yanis, that's crazy, you can have all this damage. No, because it gets easier to do. You know? I'm just throwing that out to confuse people a little bit. Think differently. You know? You think differently 5 times, 1 will be right, 4 will be wrong. Okay? But let's do that. So that's my answer to the question is, depending what you want, hard sessions, when Mersha is doing his 44 kilometers, I would argue he does the drink. Also, you can determine if for whatever reason, you know, the athlete who doesn't normally drink in training, you sense who they are. And the athlete I mentioned before that brought up during the race, because he never drinks during training, he only drinks during racing. And then when you measure how much he drinks, he's drinking 60 grams. He's not drinking. So for me, part of the long sessions is to teach your body to drink. Sorry, okay, I'm too long.
Thank you.
There's one question behind there. Oh, there as well. Okay, sorry. Okay. There and then there, Daxi. Oh, and here, sorry. Okay.
Hello, my name is Alexandros.
Yes,
Thank you for your presentation. I'm a swimming coach, so I want to know what is your recommendation for this product during the training, because in swimming we use training not far from 2.5 hours, and it's usually interval training. So do you think that they are going to help the athletes, this product, during the training?
Yeah, I would like to, if I can, rephrase your question only because it sounds as if I'm promoting a product.
No,
but I thank you. No, it's a very good question. I would answer the question as you and your team, because you obviously have a lot of experience swimming, which I don't have, do you consider it important to burn fuel in terms of carbohydrate? Is carbohydrate provision going to enhance your ability to do your training session? I would argue yes. But some people will argue maybe you want to burn. It depends who's talking to you. There are groups that I know will tell you, starve them of carbohydrate for weeks, because you're gonna get really strong, really adapted mitochondria, and then maybe just do the session, give them carbohydrate. There's a lot of periodization, interesting things one can experiment with. It depends what you want. If you want to provide carbohydrate and a lot of it, to utilize carbohydrate, to kind of delay the depletion of glycogen, then this is the best kind of thing to use, because you'll get more. But it depends as well in what temperature you're swimming in, whether it's in the sea or in the pool, how much you're going to sweat, and all these issues in terms of sweating as well, because obviously, what's the thermal response? Do you need water or do you just need fuel? Can you see what I'm saying? So it's complicated answer, but if you or your sports nutritionist or your team want carbohydrate and want a lot of it, this is the best way to do it. Because imagine having all this fluid and carbohydrate in your stomach. It's not going to help you when you swim. You want to be able to feel that there's nothing in your stomach. And the beauty of this kind of innovation is that the athletes don't feel the fuel is in the stomach. Although you saw it in the glass and it looked like jelly and you think, oh my God, this is going to feel uncomfortable, the athlete doesn't feel it in the stomach. 2 more questions and we must stop. There's one there and one there. Only because I'll be told that the floor will open and I'll go through just now. Oh, there's one there. Okay. Okay. Yeah. Sorry. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Further to your experience from the Sub-2 project, I wanted to ask you what is the best protocol for fueling just a few hours before the race? For example, do you run on empty stomach? Do you have a small breakfast just a few hours? Do you use this innovative product? Did, for example, Kenenisa in Berlin Marathon use it before or just in the race?
Very quickly because of time. Whatever you do during racing, you should do during the hard training sessions. Nothing different, okay? Normally we're in hotels, so we basically have selected the kind of foods that we want him to have that are typically high in carbohydrate from the breakfast cuisine that's there, like porridge maybe. If he likes tea, he has his toast, he has some, it depends what he likes, but very typically high in carbohydrate. Amounts that he would normally have so he knows that roughly and it doesn't upset his stomach or anything like that. And then in Berlin in particular, we were sitting in the bus together. I gave him one of the drinks and he was just sucking on it all the way there. They arrive normally about an hour beforehand. In that hour beforehand, you know, he may suck a little bit more of the drink. I'm not too bothered, but certainly let me focus very much in anything that's going to last an hour or more. Or, you know, you've got to provide fuel beforehand. It's very important. Don't go with an empty stomach. Okay? Last question. I'm sorry because of time.
Στην ιστοσελίδα της εταιρείας έχει ένα τζελ και 2 ενεργειακά ποτά. Αυτά είναι όλα ίδια σε ενέργεια ή διαφέρουν αναλόγω για κάποιο τρόπο και πώς και γιατί?
Ναι, διαφέρουν. Όταν σας έδειξα το ένα drink, το πρώτο που βγήκε ήταν το 14% που είχαμε στο Berlin. Το δεύτερο είναι περίπου 17%, okay, περισσότερο υδατάνθρακα. Και τα gels δεν γνωρίζω, δεν έχω σχέση με τα gels. Αλλά καταγράφονται πάνω στη σελίδα τι ακριβώς έχω. Δεν τα γνωρίζω περισσότερα. Τι να επιλέξεις, κατάλαβα. Αναλόγως τι θες να καταφέρεις. Αν έχεις αθλητή που έχει πρόβλημα με το στομάχι, δηλαδή για μένα, και θες απλώς να έχεις ένα ποτό εξίσου σαν το Lucozade, Gatorade, ό,τι υπάρχει στην κοινωνία έξω να αγοράσεις, πάρει κάτι τέτοιο, γιατί δεν θα δημιουργήσεις πρόβλημα στο στομάχι. Άμα θέλεις, όπως μιλήσαμε πριν, περισσότερους υδατάνθρακες, πάρει το άλλο που έχει περισσότερους υδατάνθρακες. Αναλόγως τι χρειάζεσαι, για ποιο λόγο. Αλλά μην πάτε και, το ακούσαμε σήμερα το Sub-2, πάμε να το αγοράσουμε αύριο. Έτσι, όχι. Δηλαδή, όλα έχουν να σκεφτείτε γιατί το κάνω, άμα το χρειάζομαι και, όπως είπαμε νωρίτερα, εξέτασέ το. Οκ. Ναι. Οκ. Να πείτε γιατί...
5-minute break, ένα πεντάλεπτο διάλειμμα.
Ναι.
Δεν θέλω, βασικά μην χρειάζεται να σηκώνεστε κιόλας, εκτός αν είναι κάτι που θέλετε.
Είναι καλό να είναι κρίμα.
Γιατί...
It's long.
Would like a break?
Νομίζω ότι χρειαζόστε και εσείς break, όχι μόνο αυτό, γιατί το επόμενο κομμάτι είναι πολύ έντονο και δεν θα θέλω να φύγετε μετά. Λοιπόν, αν καθόσαστε 3 ώρες θα σας δημιουργήσω και πρόβλημα με τα lipids σας.
Θα κάνουμε ένα διάλειμμα, απλά να σας πω ότι το επόμενο session έχει workshop το οποίο θα παίζει και εδώ πέρα στο διάδρομο. Και ταυτόχρονα στο κανάλι γύρω-γύρω ένας δρομέας. Ο ίδιος δρομέας θα βγαίνει από μέσα, θα πηγαίνει έξω και θα ξανάρχεται μέσα έξω. Δεν χρειάζεται να ακολουθείτε το έξω. Το έξω θα το βλέπουμε με ηλεκτρονικά μέσα. Δεν εννοώ συνέχεια live stream την κάμερα του δρομέα. Θα έχουμε άλλα μέσα που θα βλέπετε, θα το καταλάβετε σε λίγο. Και ο δρομέας θα υπάρχει κάμερα που και αυτή θα την πετάξουμε πάνω στην οθόνη. Οπότε γενικά την οθόνη θέλετε να βλέπετε. Αν θέλετε να είστε πιο κοντά στο δρομέα, απλά για να τον βλέπετε το δρομέα. Ναι. Δηλαδή, δεν χρειάζεται να πάμε να πνίξουμε το δρομέα που θα είναι εκεί πέρα που θα τρέχει. Ναι, αυτό είναι το πιο εντυπωσιακό της ημέρας. Δηλαδή, κάνουμε τεχνολογία αυτή τη στιγμή. Όλα αυτά τα σήματα, 4 σήματα, θα παίξουν στην οθόνη την πάνω. Οπότε, κάνουμε ένα δεκάλεπτο διάλειμμα. Γυρνάμε στις θέσεις μας. Παρακαλώ, μην πνίξουμε τη γωνία που θα είναι ο δρομέας. θα το βλέπουμε και στην οθόνη.
Ναι.
Ναι.